as I like to say. We've heard some interesting talk about the 2.0 side of things, and this panel really, I think, is what it's all about, is the 2.0 side of things. So we have some great panelists up here representing three projects that are similar in a lot of ways, but very different also. Vitalik Buterin, everybody's going to introduce themselves. Vitalik Buterin is the founder of Ethereum and has been in the space for quite a while. Can you tell us your story of kind of getting in?
Yeah, so first time I joined Bitcoin community was in 2011. So I know there's this really cool currency on the internet. How do I get into it? And so I found a guy on the forums. His name was Kiba. He was trying to set up this Bitcoin blog, and he was paying people 5 Bitcoins an article, which was $4 back then. And that's what I did. First job I ever had. Average salary about $1.50 an hour. Earned 20 Bitcoins, spent 8.5 of them on a t-shirt. So eventually the guy's money ran out, and so I managed to salvage the operation for a while by coming up with this interesting new business model where I would write 2 articles a week, then I would put up the first paragraph of each one on a forum and with a Bitcoin address, and I would say, these articles are held for ransom. If the community dumps 4.5 BTC into this address, then I will release the rest of the articles. And it actually worked. It actually paid me maybe something like $6 an hour for about 2 months. So then from there, I moved on to Bitcoin Magazine, started doing development. 9 months ago, quit university to go Bitcoin full-time, traveled around the world to US, Spain, Amsterdam, Israel, and then got really interested in this whole Bitcoin 2.0 space, and that's basically where Ethereum came out of.
And that, one of those articles was actually the first Bitcoin transaction that I made, was actually trying to get one of those articles. I don't remember what one it was, but getting one to try to release from ransom. So, you know, you had a huge impact on me choosing to get into Bitcoin media. David Johnston comes from more of an entrepreneurial background, but has really jumped into the space and has probably more projects individually than me and certainly just about everybody else in the space. Why Bitcoin? Why this technology?
So when I think about new trends, I really look at the fundamentals. And in 2012, when I first found out about Bitcoin, it really captured me from an economic perspective. Like, I like the idea of a currency that can't artificially be debased. And so that struck a chord with me really early on, but quickly you go through that Bitcoin newbie learning curve where you realize it's not just a currency, it's this vast payment network that lets me send transactions across the network. And then you realize it's also the technology underneath. The blockchain technology is really where the exciting stuff is. And then you realize we can use this technology and apply it to other areas, and that was sort of the light bulb moment for me. So got heavy involved in Bitcoin in 2012, started the Bit Angels with Sam Yilmaz, Michael Turpin, and others at the San Jose conference last year in 2013. Now I've got about 400 members for the Bit Angels, and we've tried to invest in all sorts of different applications, but what's really captured me the last 6 or 9 months has been these decentralized applications. Ended up writing the white paper, and now I've got to focus entirely on decentralized applications. So I ended up investing early on in Mastercoin and was asked to be one of the volunteer board of directors for the Mastercoin Foundation. And so that's how I've gotten really heavily into it.
How long did it take you to go from being interested primarily for the appreciation of the price of the unit and being more interested in the ecosystem? Was there a gap there?
It was a pretty quick transition, probably 2-3 weeks of nerding out on this.
So you just got it?
Yeah.
Interesting.
Well, you go read the white paper, you go up the learning curve, and after talking with a lot of smart people, you wrap your head around it.
Thank you. Brian Snyder is, Brian Snyder's here representing Next, and Next is kind of an interesting beast that I've been watching for the last, I guess, 2 or 3 months. I like to call it kind of like a beast that has no head but has 1,000 arms, so it's really difficult to organize, but if you ever could get it organized, then it probably has a lot of ability, in there. So you've described yourself to me as an ambassador who's actually relatively new to Bitcoin. Can you kind of describe your journey?
My journey is a long journey to get here. I graduated from Washington State University in 2004, and in between that time and now, I've seen credit card accounts get hacked, I've seen actual identities get hacked, and it's come to the realization that the central networks are not being secured adequately to protect people's interests, whether it's money or their identification or even their ability to transact money. And so it's an honor to be here and to be an ambassador for NXT or Next. And I was asked a couple times last night if I was the creator of, and no, I am not BC Next or Satoshi Nakamoto, but we all are.
Very cool.
So we've heard this, all these questions are basically for everyone, one after the other. We've heard prior panelists kind of flatly say that now is not really the time for 2.0 development, and that we should be more focused on, kind of applications that seem to interface cryptocurrency to legacy currencies like the dollar or the yen or things like that. And then on the other hand, I think that the applications that you're working with kind of are more focused around applications that are cryptography to cryptography and don't necessarily interface so much with the space. Is that fair to say? And what do you think about the idea that we should be waiting to develop these 2.0 applications until Bitcoin is ready?
I mean, I personally think the 2.0 stuff is really by far the most interesting part of the cryptocurrency scene in general. I mean, okay, you can send money instantly from A to B. Congrats, There's a whole bunch of services that let you do that in China. It's sure Bitcoin is an improvement in a lot of ways, but that by itself isn't really enough. I don't think enough of an improvement to really get the entire world excited and get the entire world to switch over onto the cryptographic ecosystem. I think the reason why people want cryptocurrencies and people want crypto protocols is precisely because of some of these 2.0 smart contracts, decentralized incentivized protocol ideas. Like that's the sort of thing that you absolutely cannot do with traditional finance, no matter how hard you try.
Right. So I think a good analogy is the early days of the internet. Right. Early days of the internet, email was the killer app. All of a sudden, I can instantly send a message to anybody on Earth. It hardly costs anything, which is a great analogy to Bitcoin and now being able to send money. But just sort of only focusing on email doesn't make sense for mass adoption. What got people excited about the internet was now there are all these different uses and websites that popped up that were relevant to them. And so I think as we see more and more projects using the underlying Bitcoin technology that are doing things other than payment and other than currency, now I care, right? As an end user, I'm maybe not a merchant, and so I don't see all the advantages, or I don't buy a lot of stuff online, but if I use Dropbox today and you told me that there was an alternative version that was 10 times less in cost, all of a sudden I have a reason to adopt this new technology and use it. And I may not even understand that I'm using that technology, but I'll be leveraging those same protocols in order to accomplish that. That's why I keep saying, and I really believe this, in 5 or 6 years, I think you'll have 1 billion people using Bitcoin, and most of them won't realize they're using it. Any more than most people consciously think of the fact that they are using HTTP when they go onto their social media or go onto a search engine.
The recent centralized exchange failures highlight the need for cryptocurrency 2.0 systems, i.e. decentralized exchanges, to allow the cryptographic community to trade in a trustless fashion, to where the transactions are signed locally and then sent through a set of automated transactions that represent a gateway. And so these gateways can exist on top of the next asset exchange and can provide an totally decentralized method for trading cryptographic pairs.
So, founders and fundraising. Again, everybody here is kind of on different places within the time frame, and everybody has a different story. Let's start with Brian about NXT. Can you tell us about what you think about founders? Are founders an advantage, or are they a disadvantage? Is fundraising an advantage, or is it a disadvantage?
So BC Next collected 21 Bitcoins to generate the Genesis block for Next, and that Genesis block created 1 billion NXT, which is a fixed amount. There will be no more than that. It's similar to the 21 million number for Bitcoin. And as far as funding and founders go,
I guess what I mean is...
It's said by the creator of Next that a world with the money can never be perfect. And so some people will always have misgivings about any system. There will always be inequalities in any system. And in the initial bootstrapping phases of a cryptocurrency ecosystem, there must be people who have stake, who have an incentive to continue the network success and to continue the security of the network.
Do you view that 21 Bitcoin that was raised as a fundraising, or was it something else?
I suppose you could call it a fundraiser.
Okay.
So I think what we're seeing is different best practices emerge here. People have certain expectations based on how Bitcoin has been built, that whatever system you choose, it's going to be transparent. People are going to be able to participate on the process on an equal basis, and that it'll be based on open source. And you have these best practice expectations, and I think if you go along those and you make a best effort with your protocol and the way that you issue your tokens for these applications, then the community will get on board. If you do things like try to keep things proprietary, or you're not transparent about the process, or people aren't able to participate on an equal and fair basis, then there's a lot more skepticism. And I think those best practices are really starting to emerge.
Yeah, definitely fairness and this whole issue of does the protocol privilege certain people is something that people talk about quite a lot. I think one of the problems here is that there definitely are a lot of people in some of the earlier Bitcoin community, whether it's the more sort of market libertarian or open source culture, or a combination of both, is that there's a lot of emphasis in those kinds of schools on systems that are sort of technically fair, that don't sort of explicitly privilege specific people or specific institutions, but more from an entrepreneurial standpoint, the thing that you need to understand is that really Bitcoin itself is not really all that egalitarian. Like, sure, there's nothing in the Bitcoin code that says like Satoshi Nakamoto and Hal Finney are entitled to a pre-mine of 30,000 BTC. But the reality is, I, for example, never had a chance to even do anything with Bitcoin in 2009 or 2010. I've never even heard of it. So it's not really a matter of whether the system is sort of technically fair. It's more a matter of whether it's actually fair, whether the process is widely distributed, whether it's designed in such a way that anyone can participate, like what the distribution of the currency supply is. Obviously, if like one particular entity has 40% of it, that's a bad thing. Also, once again, is there transparency? So, and a lot of these different fundraising methods, David actually made this point to me a few months ago, are even more fair than just something that's purely mining based. Because if you have something like Bitcoin, it's a purely mining-based currency. In order to mine it now, you still need money. You need money to buy an ASIC, or you need $5 million of capital to make an ASIC company. I mean, that's where the real money is, right? So, whereas if you have something like a fundraiser, then anyone who has any money can participate. So it's a matter of coming up with a mechanism where lots of different diverse constituencies can participate in different ways.
Right, and I think that's the other best practice emerging is, if you're not doing something that requires hashing power, then why only reward miners? So we are now having applications that don't necessarily need hashing power, that maybe are built on Ethereum or on top of Bitcoin. And what they need to do is incentivize other user groups. So I and Vitalik talked about this early on, is you have developers that you need to incentivize to add to the open source code. You have people you want to participate in the crowd sale when you initially distribute the tokens that want to support this financially. And I think ought to be the largest pool is whatever user behavior you need in order for this system to work, that ought to be what you reward in the biggest way. And so let's take a particular example. Storage won the recent hackathon in Austin, put up $1 million, the BitAngels, for the hackathon there. They took first place. And it's a system that rewards people for adding storage, computer storage, to a cloud. And that's the majority of how their tokens will be distributed, for everybody setting up these nodes that compensate people and people who are competing to provide this storage to the network. But you also have a pool for developers that contribute to the open source, and you also have a pool for the initial crowd sale. And so that's sort of the different constituents that you were talking about. That's what we really see emerging.
Well, so let's talk about use cases. I mean, these 2.0 technologies are, sort of, it's a bit of an ethereal concept, no pun intended. So what are some early use cases that you see coming out on your platform?
Okay. One thing that people are very excited about is this decentralized Dropbox idea. So, you have these systems where if you have a 100 gigabyte file, you can upload it, they store it for you. But why can't that be a cloud, as in an actual decentralized cloud? So, you upload a file, anyone can download it, and then there's a contract which automatically pays out money to, or whatever kind of tokens, to whoever manages to submit a cryptographic proof that they still have the file. Like the reason why it's exciting is, as we said at the last Texas conference, Dropbox has a markup of something like 100x. So if you can drop that down even 10x, potentially got a massive improvement there. And on the seller side, you can earn money by renting out your hard drive. That's a powerful message.
The cool thing is that people have been working on this for a while. One of my favorite projects in that space is MadeSafe, is doing the back end for what storage is doing on the front end. And they've thought through a lot of those hard problems around how do you do fully decentralized storage, encrypt it end-to-end, make it so there's no central point of failure. So yeah, I think projects like that are going to be a really easy to understand use case for most people, because people are starting to get used to the idea of the share economy. They're used to Airbnb and be able to earn extra income by the renting out their house, or now there are all these car sharing apps that let people earn extra income doing that. Why not rent out extra storage space sitting on a 3 terabyte hard drive sitting on your desk? And so I think it's sort of a natural extension of that people will understand and really be able to use every day.
One of the interesting use cases of NXT is fraud prevention. With regular, for example, the example being used here is the exchange DGEX, which is run by Graviton of the NXT community. And in a situation where a fraudulent request was made from an account, the administrator, Gravitron, was able to contact the initial funding owner, the real owner of the account, and seek the authentication token from within inside the NXT account. And so, given that the request was made from some other account completely, the request to provide the token was not able to be completed, and so the withdrawal was not processed.
So what is it about the NXT that allowed that to happen where it wouldn't in Bitcoin?
There's, within the NXT client, a token authentication feature where you can plug in a website and your NXT account number, and it feeds out a cryptographic hash that can only be unlocked by the other person.
Yeah, I see. So we're kind of going through this in a little bit of a backwards way. I'd like each of you to take just a minute or two to explain your project. And Brian, let's start with you again.
Okay, so NXT is a 100% proof-of-stake cryptocurrency that operates on its own blockchain, and one of the features that is being developed right now is called the Next Asset Exchange. And the Next Asset Exchange, once released on the mainnet, once it's all tested and fully debugged, will allow gateways to build on top of the asset exchange to allow. At this point, there's been a proof of use case of a fully automated multi-signature cryptocurrency gateway that has transferred Dogecoin into the Next Asset Exchange running on testnet and transferred it back out of the Next Asset Exchange back into the real world Doge wallet. So that type of
Let me ask a follow-up on that. So what you're saying is that somebody transferred Doge into NXT where it was represented by an NXT asset for Doge, and then somebody traded it back out. And so in that way, people were able to trade Doge on an entirely decentralized peer-to-peer exchange?
Yes.
Okay, that's different.
So as just a proof of use case that has been demonstrated so far.
So the case with Mastercoin and the Master Protocol is a similar use case, but on top of the Bitcoin cryptographic ledger. And so with Master Protocol, and Master is just an acronym for metadata archived by standard transaction embedding records, and that's exactly what it does. It's embedding records in the Bitcoin ledger using these standard transaction types, and you're interpreting that metadata to say, oh, that's not a regular Bitcoin transaction, that's a Dogecoin token or a Purecoin token or one of the user currencies that people have created using Master Protocol that could represent sort of any different type of project. For instance, MaidStay for storage, if they issue their user currencies on top of the Master Protocol, all the Master Protocol wallets will be able to recognize that transaction as a particular token, and somebody's sending that from one place to another. And so that's really at the heart is the decentralized exchange that's recently been launched, and the next thing is the user currencies, and it's all on top of Bitcoin. So the interesting thing that that creates is if Bitcoin is successful as a general cryptographic ledger, we'll see more and more assets, more and more tokens built on top of the ledger, really adding an enormous amount of value to Bitcoin itself, expanding Bitcoin from today a currency and a payment network to a secure cryptographic ledger. And that really makes it a lot more like the internet than like email. So it'll be interesting to see how that evolves.
Yeah, it's a good thing that the analogy between the internet and email brought up, because one of the ways that I like explaining Ethereum is actually talking about specifically the internet. So if you look at the internet back in the 1990s, we had this language called HTML. Started off by let's have text web pages, and then HTML came out with things like specific features, things like paragraphs, underlining, bold. At some point, we decided, oh hey, static content isn't good enough. People want to be able to do forms. So HTML came up with a specific feature that allowed you to do forms inside of HTML. You could fill out forms, you could submit them, and they'll go straight to the server and so forth. So with Ethereum, then, however, in 2000, around 2000, Brendan Eich came out with this programming language called JavaScript. And the idea is that instead of having this internet protocol suite with dozens and dozens of features on top of it, let's just have the internet or the web with the programming language built in, so you can build whatever features you want on top. And since then, we've seen people have built Gmail on top of JavaScript, people have built Facebook on top of JavaScript, people have built Bitcoin wallets on top of JavaScript. All these applications that Brendan Eich never even thought of are possible just because he created this protocol that contained this universal programming language that allows you to do everything. So Ethereum basically takes that exact same idea and brings it to the world of cryptocurrency. So it's this sort of generalized contract network where you can encode any kind of arbitrary rules, any arbitrary transaction types you want, just any financial contract, decentralized storage, make your own currency, just by defining exactly what they are in the programming language and putting it on the blockchain.
So why not use Bitcoin? And to David, why use Bitcoin? What are the advantages? What are the disadvantages? And Vitalik, let's start with you.
Okay. So there's two different ways we could have used Bitcoin. So one way is, okay, let's take Bitcoin as it stands today, and let's try and make slight modifications to it. The thing is that Bitcoin does have a built-in scripting language, but it's very limited. So one of the big limitations, for example, is that transactions, they don't really have state. So a transaction can be spent or it can be unspent. There's no way to use that to make some kind of complicated 5-step contract, right? Or 5-step financial contract, or even a sub-currency that has as much state as you want. So the other approach is to do something like colored coins or Counterparty or any of these other ones in Mastercoin and say, let's use the Bitcoin blockchain as a data layer. So it's a good approach. In fact, one fun fact is that the original Ethereum white paper back around November 27th actually had the Ethereum protocol running on top of Primecoin. I think the biggest reason to do it independently is just a matter of scalability. So there are a lot of, so with some of these protocols, if you do it on the Bitcoin blockchain, in order to figure out what the current state of the system is, you have to process every single transaction. Whereas if you do it on your own network, then you can actually use mechanisms like Merkle trees and allow people to, and allow various different kinds of caching and optimization to happen, so you can have secure light clients that know exactly what just a particular part of the state that they care about.
So you want to reinvent the wheel.
Yes, we want to reinvent the wheel and make it better.
Okay.
Well, and I think that analogy of programming languages is a really good one, and one I often use. People ask me, well, aren't you competitors with this or this project? And I try to remind people that these are all open source projects, and that whatever best practices emerge, everyone else will copy. That's how open source works. That's how it should work. And so I think of these more as programming languages that have different strengths and have different weaknesses. For the particular features of the master protocol, we wanted to build on top of the largest, most secure cryptographic ledger, and today, that's Bitcoin. Master protocol doesn't have to forever stay only on Bitcoin. There's already been discussion around the devs about partnering with Ethereum to build on top of their platform, partnering with MadeSafe to build on top of their platform. So I think this will exist. It's sort of like asking, are you only going to do this app for iPhone? No, I'll do it for Android too. Maybe I'll do it for other platforms. There's no reason we can't leverage sort of all those capabilities based on the different platforms that get built. And so, but again, for the particular features of the master protocol, they were straightforward enough, decentralized exchange of tokens, defining assets, that the fastest and clearest path to success was to do this on top of the Bitcoin ledger in a way that fits into their existing architecture. And hey, if Ethereum gives us awesome advanced features, wonderful. That's great. We will, make sure our wallet and everything integrates with them and can take advantage of those features as those roll out. But there's sort of this race to do the decentralized exchange, and one of the ways we got there very quickly was by using an existing ledger and an existing blockchain.
Well, let me follow up with that real quickly. You're doing a decentralized exchange, and I've been playing around with some of the Bitcoin-based decentralized exchanges, and I noticed that while a 10-minute blockchain, 10-minute block time is really, really fast when you compare it to a wire transfer, when you compare it to trying to trade on a trading platform, it's incredibly slow.
Sure.
So, do you think that's a problem for Bitcoin in the medium term?
Not necessarily. Bitcoin is never, or not in the near term, going to be a high-frequency trading platform. It's not designed that way. It's meant as a cryptographic ledger. And so I think, gentleman mentioned earlier, best way I would do that today is I would do it off-chain, and every periodic amount of time, 10 minutes, 20 minutes, whatever, I would merge those records into the blockchain. And now, even if my high-frequency trading fails, I've got the records as of 10 minutes ago that I know are stored in the secure cryptographic ledger. And so I think it makes sense more to use something like open transactions or another thing that's meant to act at a very fast pace and do that off-chain and then merge those records.
Are these solutions, what's the word I'm looking for here? Do they require us to trust you?
So the best that you can offer off-chain today is a federated model. So if you look at OT as an example, you create a pool of servers, and it would be very, very difficult to take over all of those servers in order to fake a transaction. So they have a high level of security, but I would still want to merge into the ledger to get an even better level of security. What I'd really like to see is somebody take these federated systems for OT and other systems and figure out a way to fully decentralize them. I think that's going to come. I think it's going to require identification protocols. It's going to require reputation protocols. It's going to need other elements before you can fully do that process.
I think it's interesting that the Java technology being referenced as the enabler of the internet applies directly to the coding of the NXT ecosystem, because NXT core is coded in Java, as opposed to Bitcoin, which is coded in C. And in addition, Bitcoin has, I'm sure as everyone knows, a 10-minute blockchain generation time, whereas NXT has a 1-minute blockchain generation time. And in addition, the average cost of a Bitcoin transaction right now is $32 approximately, and that can be found on blockchain.info and is a result of the competitive securing of the Bitcoin network via all of these ASICs and via proof of work. And so NXT provides a significant energy saving advantage over the long term, as well as a faster block generation time.
So how does it accomplish that?
every single node on the network has to agree every single minute which node will process the next block.
So it's another way to find consensus.
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah, proof of stake.
And how long has NXT actually been working in practice?
NXT has been in existence for about 4 months now. Proof of stake was just thought of probably 6 months ago.
Huh. Interesting. So, you know, the legal landscape is interesting. These are all global projects, and again, there are differing approaches to kind of dealing with this. So let's start with you, Brian. You know, change the paradigm, conform to the paradigm, or completely avoid the paradigm, and how?
NXT is a completely decentralized network. There are no leaders, and at the core, it cannot be stopped, just like Bitcoin cannot be stopped. The blockchain will continue to roll on, will continue to generate new blocks as long as there is incentive to the members of the network.
So do you have any plans to interface with regulators, or has that even been discussed within it, or is this just outside?
Well, the core provides extensibility to other programmers. So other programmers can build gateways, as I described, onto the next asset exchange. And so those gateway providers would fully integrate with the regulations, know your customer, anti-money laundering laws, etc. And so at the core, the system will run no matter what and is not beholden to regulation. The providers that build on top of the core can choose to come into compliance where they need to come into compliance or choose not to.
Yeah, I think that's the right answer. Bitcoin has given us a really good example of how to operate these type of projects. Bitcoin is an open source tool. It's global, and it's not trying to do compliance on a global level with the open source. It's just an open source tool set, and any operator can take that Bitcoin protocol and use it in their particular jurisdiction to run an exchange, run a business, and it's up to the operator in that jurisdiction to comply with their local regulations. And so that's part of why Bitcoin has been so successful. You can see people have taken the Bitcoin protocol and you build an exchange in China, different than you build an exchange in the United States, different than you build an exchange in Europe. And so it's given people that flexibility to do compliance in their local jurisdiction, but have access to this open source platform that give them all the tools they need. And so I think that's really important. I talk a lot about that idea of not, instead of trying to do global compliance, which is really tough as a startup and as a new project, but doing local compliance and just leaving the top level as an open source protocol. When it comes to people issuing the tokens, the frame I like to think about is, imagine I wanted to develop a new video game. And I went on to a website and said, hey, everybody that wants to support this new video game can send me $10. And I will give you the first password to this new video game. All the people that support it will get this new password. I collect the money, I do the work. 6 months later, I release the video game, and all the people that gave me my, participated in my initial crowd sale of the video game get access. That's a really good frame to think about this, because when people offer tokens, they are literally giving them, all their participants, a private key, which is the same as a password, right? They're getting a password that accesses this particular application. And people associate a value with that password because now anybody with that password can access this new application. But I think from a framework on the regulatory side, that's how I think about this. It is a crowd sale. It's very much sort of a crowd activity that's participating in accessing these applications because there's such a broad array of things that people will use this for.
Yeah, well, one of the problems I think is that even though we might think that all we're doing is just pre-selling tokens, you do have to keep in mind that the regulators might think in a different way, especially if you go around and promote it as a massive investment opportunity. Yep. So I think there definitely is room for compliance of some kind, and it's like it's not as much of a problem with Bitcoin because it's a completely anonymous project. But on the other hand, if you go with some kind of fundraising approach, then you do have. It is something that you do have to think about. That is one of the costs that come with the benefits. So, like unless it's possible to gain the benefits of that paradigm while still keeping the whole thing completely decentralized with no central parties whatsoever. But that's, I think, a challenge that's still.
So anybody interested in this area, I'd encourage you to check out CODA, is the consortium of decentralized applications. This includes Mastercoin, Colored Coins, BitShares, Ethereum, Open Transactions. We're all getting together, people in these Bitcoin 2.0 areas, and saying, let's pool our resources to do legal work, do regulatory work, and figure out what are the goes and what are the no-goes in this area so we can all be smart. We want to do this in an intelligent way that complies with all the jurisdictions.
Sure. Yeah. So we have 5 minutes left. We didn't get through all my questions. I'm sorry we're not going to have time to take questions from the audience. I want to get kind of broad and visionary here for a second and talk about what this ecosystem looks like 5 years out or 2 years out if you succeed with what you're attempting to do. What does the world look like? Let's start with you, Vitalik.
Yeah, I mean, well, with Ethereum, we're not real. I think in the long term, we don't even need to necessarily know all that much about us. People don't go around talking all that much about something like TCP/IP, or people talk about the applications on top of it. So that's like in the long term, people aren't necessarily going to be writing contracts, even in our Python code, which to be fair is much easier to use than the fourth scripting language that comes with Bitcoin. Like in the long term, people are going to be using apps, and the job is to create a way that allows you to sort of take all this Ethereum, all this smart contract functionality, package it up into tools which are simultaneously user-friendly, easy to use, but also in the background have all of the security assurances that decentralized consensus technology provides. So it'll basically look just like your iPhone, except you have the reassurance that it's actually secure on the back end.
So I'll take this opportunity to coin Johnston's law. Johnston's law is as follows: everything that can be decentralized will be decentralized. That's the vision here. I look at this as the entire tech stack, and we're still at the early days where we're decentralizing data and storage and bandwidth. But once we have those elements in the next few months, we can build more and more advanced protocols and decentralized systems on top of those basic elements. So I think we can take all the existing hierarchy or centralized systems and one by one decentralize them using this type of technology. I'm not saying it's a model that applies to everything, but those things that can be decentralized, that it makes economic sense, they will be, I think, over the coming years.
Okay, you still have 60 seconds on your answer, so I actually want to press you with a further question. Sure. What do you think the single most exciting project is that you are looking at that is on the 2.0 use case side? Real, 50 seconds.
Number 1, MadeSafe. Number 2, Ethereum. Number 3, Open Garden. That is my compute. MadeSafe is my storage. And Open Garden is my mesh network that gives me decentralized bandwidth.
And the thing that ties these together is tokens.
Tokens tie it together because it lets us monetize the use of these applications without an arbitrary fee or profit margin built in. And so we're working with Open Garden to create a white paper that brings together how you tokenize their system and incentivize people to share the internet. Ethereum's doing a great job with how do we incentivize scripting and consensus around that. The MadeSafe guys, I think, have done an incredible job. And I'll put it this way. I got on a plane and I went to Scotland to meet all their developers. And I was really, really impressed. I think they'll talk more publicly about what they're doing in April at the New York conference. But yeah, those are the 3 things that I'm really excited about.
Thank you, David. Okay, NXT has the last 90.
So the NXT network in the future will have a fully operational asset exchange, and on that asset exchange will be the gateways I described previously. And so these gateways could operate in any country. They could be fully regulated, or they could be running anonymity protocol like the Zero Cash protocol from Johns Hopkins University. And so these are applications that are being worked on right now, and additional uses of the next decentralized cryptocurrency ecosystem is the reanimation of dead capital that is not able to be titled or sold because people don't have access to the financial services, and it's largely due to the excessive costs of old analog style banking.
Can you expand on that a little bit in 27 seconds?
I can try. So most of the world has not experienced the internet yet at this point. Even though the internet's 25 years old, it still needs to be secured, and most of the world still has not experienced the benefits of it. So as we go forward, decentralized applications will provide the avenue to be able to deliver safe and secure solutions to the rest of the world.
Gentlemen, thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys. That was great. Okay, so we got our lunch break now. It's raining outside, so we're serving